We are back. Coffee Talk. Mike Sick, Mark Mont. It is fall. Mark, I had this idea. This thought came to me. This insidious thought came to me. How
Oh boy.
Starbucks, for some people in some countries, especially America, their only foray, I don't even know if I'm using that word correctly. Their only foray into fall, to even know it's fall, is to get a pumpkin spice latte from Starbucks. So Starbucks has cornered the minds of people to say, hey, it's fall. I need a pumpkin spice latte. Drones going to Starbucks. Isn't that malicious?
Is it malicious? I don't think
Am
it's
I wrong?
malicious. Are you wrong? Is it right? I mean, I don't think it's either of these things. I think it's disorienting and it's a little bit odd, which is what's prompting your statements to kind of come into question of said motif. But it is a marvel, right? It is a marvel that we've gotten to this point in humanity where holidays and seasons are very much locked and loaded. They're very much tied to very commercial things or commercial brands or, advertisements. Or with Christmas, it's the Mariah Carey song. Yeah, I think it's, it's unfortunate, right? There's bigger things to focus on when it comes to the fall season, bigger things to focus on when it comes to Thanksgiving and Christmas, etc. So if your indicator is Starbucks, it's not fall until I have that pumpkin spice latte, then you may need to, expand your culture and see what you could do about that.
Reading Rainbow, but AI, as the title suggests. This is what we're talking about today. And it's a reference to Juelz Santana recently being on a podcast called the No Funny Show. And he essentially said that by 9th grade, kids should be learning how to start businesses, et cetera, et cetera. And mathematics is more fundamental than reading because AI can replace the things that reading can do. So math is more important than reading, according to Juelz. Thoughts on that, Mark?
As a fan of Juelz, I just wish he didn't say that. I know what he was getting at because I went back and watched a little bit more seconds that was on the start and on the before the clip starts and after the clip finishes. Yeah. And I know he was trying to, he was trying to say something a little bit different than how it was clipped. But pound for pound, I just disagree. I disagree entirely. I don't think any fundamentals or basics should be compared to the other, this or that. That we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that at all. It should never be reading or math. That this shouldn't happen.
Both fundamental. They didn't have mathematics Rainbow.
You said, mathematics. Right. Well, they had no, but they had Hooked on Phonics. Remember that? Yeah.
They didn't have
Schoolhouse Rock probably had a couple episodes about math.
Right. But it's all fundamentals. It's all fundamentals. Now, I do agree with his second part or the latter half of his argument that by 9th grades, kids should learn business and finance and things like that. I actually do think that should be fundamental as well.
Yes.
But the first half is pretty wild. And honestly, the way they clipped it, like you said, makes him look pretty crazy. But that's not entirely his fault because as Americans and just people that ingest media and consume so much, these news outlets or even anybody who posts anything with some type of argument and whatever intention, they will play into your confirmation bias. Some people will just post things to get you to argue. And us being dumb Americans, we will play right into that. And not only just dumb Americans, but people that do not look any further than what is being presented to us. Jay-Z said, do you listen to music or do you just skip through it? On a song with Eminem, it's called Renegade. Everybody knows it. Ever since I heard that, it made me realize I need to formulate my own opinions. Let me just stop listening to the single and assuming the album is whack. So I'm not going to look at a post regardless of what it is, whether it's something like this or even politics, right? On any side, I'm like, okay, I heard it. You showed it to me. But before I start arguing with some strangers or spewing hate towards the author or the person that said the thing, I'm going to look a little further into it. So today we want to unpack what was said, but it still sounds crazy because
it's interesting.
AI cannot replace.
No. We can't do that. We shouldn't do that. But from the sake of kind of playfulness, I do think that it's important sometimes to make scenarios or make sentences that seem a little bit obscure or a little bit, and sometimes in many instances, false, just to see what can come out of that. Now, I know
Yeah.
that wasn't the case in this conversation, but it can spawn some very interesting mechanics. It can spawn some very interesting results when you do try to see what happens when you explore it further. What would you do if you couldn't read, right? Not that you shouldn't read, but let's say you have a seizure or you have some type of health complication and you actually lose your reading ability, right? I know people who have gotten into accidents and it brought them back to an elementary reading school level, right? So from that point forward, even though they're aware that they're grown and that they should be able to, they can't. So from that point forward, how does one move? How does one still get equals this? How do you still get the results you want to get if you actually can't read, right? So I think that is a lot more compelling to discuss than with respects to like social media, versus just taking this one little clip and being like, he's stupid, this is dumb, this is, you know what I mean? That doesn't get us anything. Again, for me, the main takeaway though is very much about no. How can we like flip this around to be able to make this something a lot more resultative? Like what could this be used for? Like what's the takeaway? What's the way we can remix this and actually have some yield from this instead of it just being another clip that this flies off into the darkness of the internet?
For sure. I think one thing to really consider, and he talks about this in the interview, right, where somebody says, if you can't read, you'll sign a bad record deal. And he himself, like, he had an argument with Cameron when they was kind of split a little bit for a little while. And he said when he found Juelz, he was on the corner doing whatever. And he was mainly Spanish speaking. And he signed him to a bad contract and Juelz and him had beef, yada, yada. And Juelz's argument was that, yeah, if you sign a bad deal, it's because your lawyer read it over and not you. So stop using that as a talking point or an excuse. But the thing that's being overlooked is that some people do not have lawyers. He had the privilege of having a lawyer. Maybe he did or didn't at that time. And so the fact is 54% of Americans read at a sixth grade or lower reading level. And so if you can't comprehend certain things and you don't have access to certain things like a lawyer, that makes that argument not as valid because you're talking about access and privilege now. And so fundamentally, the lack of reading or comprehension affects the most marginalized people in America. And honestly, you go to another country, what you going to use? Your language, reading, or you going to use math? You can go to Europe and be like, well, you might need to like add up how much money you're spending, but like you need to be able to read and translate and comprehend things,
Yeah, I know. It's pretty integral to the success of your life and day to day. I went to China and like let's bend this a bit, right? So I went to China and obviously I can't speak Chinese, right? Fun fact. So a lot of times it was very much when it came to food, it was this. Here, I'll take this. Can I have this? And it works. It works for a moment, but then you try to use your Google Translator or whatever translator app you're using to try to close the gap. Or maybe you find somebody who knows Chinese and English and they can help you, try to translate between, the parties or whatnot. I think those scenarios are very interesting to kind of look at because it's more interesting to try to figure out what you would do if you couldn't read, or if you're in a situation where, again, like you are marginalized and you don't have the resources that can kind of gap fill your inability. That part for me is interesting, right? It's obvious that we need to read. We don't need to debate that. We don't need to debate whether or not you need the basics, right? We need the basics. We agree on that. There's nothing to discuss there. But it is very interesting to flip it on its head and see what moves do you make when you don't have those basics at your hand, right? If you don't have access to the persons that can help you fill in those gaps, still, what moves do you make? How do you still survive? How do you still get the results you're trying to get?
To support his argument that AI can read a book to you, or you can listen to a book on Audible, and that certain fundamental basics like common sense and reading a room, like somebody pointed out on that podcast, is more fundamental than reading and math. And that's an argument. It goes hand in hand, but it doesn't replace either. I mean, math is critical in the age of AI, but reading is a non-negotiable. How you going to learn about math if you don't know how to read it? Come on. You can look at a contract and look at the numbers, but you don't know if you're being exploited or not unless you understand the language and the context and the implications that's in this contract, right?
It's interesting because a lot of times we focus on stuff that's like up here, right? We focus on stuff that's up here instead of that ground level. And societally, when we don't put enough attention on that ground level, we're liable to believe that what's in this range is what's most important and that everything more so revolves around this stuff. But what we don't realize is that there's a leak, right? Or there's a nail in that tire and some air is going out. The pressure of that tire is getting worse and that tire is getting worse. When it comes to self, right? I'll be back on my stretching. I'll be back on my water intake proper next week. The next week turns to next month. Next month turns to a New Year's resolution, right? We do that. We don't look at those super ground level basics enough. We don't make them as big a deal, right? Why are we talking about reading? Why are we talking about such a basic right now? We're only talking about it because a video went viral of Santana talking about it being, something you can skip past. But that shouldn't be the case, right? At a standard basic level, right? We don't even have like a proper grounding of social media, right? Like when it comes to social media and how things operate on there isn't like a proper average. Like we're not hitting the right average of the basics that should be in place. So instead, what do we get? We get a lot of bad results because everything goes. There's no rules. It's the Wild West, just like the internet. Not enough research was done ahead of time to make sure that there was the right, filtration and the right censorship and the right considerations to make sure that the impacts wouldn't be net negative. Are they net negative? That's a long conversation to have. But it is very interesting when you look at what is basic that's not explored and that does have holes in it. And when it comes to where we're at now, it's very easy to see, especially as we get older and continue to kind of remind ourselves to look back at basics and fundamentals, how much of it just gets skipped over, whether it's reasoning, logic, discernment, you know what I mean? Right? These particular motifs that are at the ground level, they have other chapters that very much need to be explored. We don't do that, then there's going to be a copious amount of solutions and just viable pieces and nuggets that we're just skipping past that can make a very large impact on our lives and very likely the lives of others and the world and the history. The fabric of reality is in the balance of how progressive and how much progress we make with the time that we have and how we use it.
And in the world that we're living in now, especially they bring up AI. AI is a way to cut corners for some people. And so he's proposing that you can cut the corners of reading with AI. And then also, even with social media and all of that, it's people are looking for instant gratification and ways to overlook fundamentals. And if you keep up that same pattern, then we're no better than the robots that, AI is becoming and eventually trying to replace us as human beings. So it's like you keep having this leniency or reliance on computers, AI, and technology. And it's not a good thing. And again, going back to the fundamentals that literacy rates and also digital literacy go hand in hand. So what does that mean? If 1 in 5 adults reads at a 3rd grade level and only people that are affluent, middle class, wealthy, actually have access to technology and can actually read beyond the 3rd grade level, what does that do? It widens the wealth disparity gap, the digital literacy gap, even in job markets and college and whatnot. Because if only the most affluent writers, because you got to read to be able to write, have access to the technology to even use AI, where does that leave everybody else? It leaves them in survival mode. So then what happens is everybody's running around like it's survival mode. But what are we going to do? We're going to consume because that's our form of entertainment and passing the day by. And then we're going to use our opinion and we're going to use all these things that are being controlled by somebody above us. And that's the danger zone to me. That right there is the danger zone. And, you going back to the point of regulation of social media and whatnot, I mean, that's just the reality of the world we in, the country that we in, is that, smaller government and not bigger government. And so not everybody, the government shouldn't regulate social media, but there's always that battle, right? That's way above my pay grade. But at the same time, so what I'd like to point out is that us as human beings, we need more discernment. We need more discernment on what's being force fed to us, what's popping up on our timelines and algorithms. Do you listen to music or do you just skip through it? Use that comprehension. Do not forget those fundamentals, because it is a non-negotiable to be able to read. I use AI to help me write more so I can actually read more and comprehend more. I'll read a book, I'll ask for the synopsis and the breakdown, and as I read, I'll like kind of reference back, I'll kind of nerd out a little bit. And if I put a book down that I haven't read in a minute, I'll say, hey, I'm on chapter 15. Can you remind me what's happened to this point? And then it'll tell me. I'm like, cool, thank you. It's kind of like playing The Witcher. I don't know if you ever played The Witcher 3 on PlayStation or Xbox. Yeah, but when you in the game, when you pick up where you left off, it'll give you a replay, like recap of what's happened to that point. And it's like the best thing that's ever happened in a video game. Because I'm like, yeah, I haven't played this in 7 months. I don't even know what's going on. So it gives you the recap.
Have they started incorporating AI into video game, Jen?
I don't know. That would be cool.
Ooh.
That would be crazy.
I'm actually like unhappy that I mentioned that. I'm like, oh no, because Big Brother is probably listening and is like, ooh, we can use that. That was a great idea, Mark Mott.
Yeah. But look, y'all, they're cutting funding for critical skills, the fundamentals, reading, math, all of that. All of that art has a trickle-down effect. Art, everything. It'll build resilience in our communities and whatnot, because us as Americans, and I'm sure all around the world, but especially us as Americans, we thrive through resilience. But that doesn't mean you got to put us with our backs in the corner. It's not like that. But it is fundamental because, again, the most marginalized people and communities are the ones that are being affected by those cuts. And then it's going to widen that gap. There'll be generational consequences, like people don't write in cursive no more. That's not as detrimental as in 5 years, people do not read. That would be crazy, So it's very important, y'all, that we master these fundamentals and improve on them. And I also want to add one more thing too. Survival mode. Well, I'll say this. If you look at the Philippines, right, and I'll always reference the Philippines on these talks, a lot of that is survival mode. Before education and even public education wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't a right. It was a privilege for a very long time. But we've gotten by centuries without that privilege, right? Now that it's a right. But it's still taking time. So they're in survival mode. But you know what? The Philippines are the most humble, loving, kindest people. And in that survival mode, they find a way to be who they are, right? And I feel like I theorized that with education, even like accelerated learning with AI, how many times have you seen somebody learn something or know something, and then now they act better or they act brand new because you don't know it, right? And I feel like that can be harmful as well. So just because AI can help you do something, it doesn't mean that you now accelerate and go and chase greener pastures, because it feels like that's what you need to do in this day and age. But you can't leave people behind. You can use that knowledge and information for good. So I think that's one thing I'm going to be keeping my eye out for, is just after you get out of survival mode and you wise up, you modernize, if you will, you got to understand what these things are doing to your psyche. Just like, okay, you learn something on AI. How much are you actually retaining? Or if you're actually retaining that, hey, now what does that do to your psyche? Are you just going to forget it? Or are you going to use it for good? Or are you going to act brand new? These are all things that, like, the AI age is psychologically and mentally putting us through. And the more you're aware of it, the more human you can be and the less technology reliant you are.
I don't think AI is the culprit. I think we were here a long time ago. Unfortunately, I think that AI might be possibly making it worse or accelerating the speed or shining a brighter spotlight on it. But ultimately, we've been had a problem. We've been had a problem as it pertains to that, right? You can look at the education system. Hey, shout out to all the educators, the teachers that care, and those that have actually made strides with respects to, progress with education, of course. But the reality is we still have serious problems within the education system and this disparity between who has access to it, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have alignment. We don't have alignment as a world. We don't even have alignment within particular schools. There might not even be alignment between, the president of the school or the it's been so long. The principal and the teachers. We, as a human race, don't have this little 10 commandments, if you will. When you get to this age, here's the things that you need to focus on so that we can all be on the same page, move in this direction, and make sure that these dubs happen and these losses don't. As kind of square cookie cutterish as that sounds, it's incredibly valuable and it's incredibly missing. And without that, you just have millions. You have an infinity amount of variations, various aberrations, if you will, various offshoots that range in positive and negative. We can't really be on any type of common accord. We can't expect these results, right? We can't predict these causalities. Everything is very Linux. Everything is very freestyle. Everything is very off the top. Expectancy of this and that becomes a lot more loose in terms of the ratio of it being an accurate expectancy. I'm saying all this because we already have had problems with respects to our basics. We don't have alignment on the basics, and we definitely don't put enough value on those. We don't take enough time to put value on the basics of our health, our mental strength, our emotional capacity, our emotional capacity, street etiquette, public etiquette, consideration for fellow man and woman. There's so many major key basics and fundamentals that as a society, we don't have enough commonplace discussion about or diving into or reassessment of. We're way off. We're way off.
Well,
so now
that's why I think
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's where being centerist, if you will, or reaching across the aisle or meeting in the middle to have those discussions will help, because what works in a red state may not work in a blue state for those people if they are accurately representing the people, right? And not to turn this into politics, but in the age of AI, and especially the way we have access to information, especially data, because if they're mining our data to sell me a cup of coffee, they should be able to mine that data to figure out what we actually need fundamentally, right? And so I remember, case in point, in California, I was learning about biology. My science class, I was looking at trees. We were also learning about emotions and stuff like that, just being an adult. And this was in 8th grade. But then when I transferred to Virginia, in Virginia, it was chemistry. In Virginia, there was nothing about life, learning, Planned Parenthood, or nothing like that, because that was a red state at that time. And so there's a big difference there. So it is hard to kind of find that 10 commandments, or just being in alignment on what everybody needs from a government structure from the top down. But to that point, though, and I'll toss it back to you, with AI now, it should be easier than ever for the principal to be in alignment with the teacher, because there's data that can be mined. We can figure it out. See, with colonization and civilizing every savage, that is so antiquated. And that's where colonization got it wrong, or even us taking wars to the Middle East. Because it's we think that we can fundamentally help you and modernize, civilize these savages, but it doesn't even need to necessarily be like that. So even learning from all that, it's hey, how can we use technologies and the advancements that we have to better the human race, but in a way that doesn't affect or redirect, demolish your foundations as a society, as a culture, as a religion, any of that. And so going back to education, it should be easier than ever nowadays to use data and to use practicality from that data, whether it's AI or just basic communications, whether it's on both sides of the coast, should be easier than ever. And we should be able to fundamentally reset to further strengthen the basics, to your point, versus relying on technology. They don't need to teach, hey, y'all, this is how AI makes it easier. It's no, hey, this is how AI strengthens your fundamentals. And once you master those basics, you can use tools like these to create anything in your wildest dreams, to own your own business, start your own business, and to be the best human that you can be for your society and your people and family.
The issue, and we should, I agree, technology and where we're at and all of that should contribute to us being able to get that get that happy medium, get that staging staged. It should be able to happen and happen quick, but it doesn't because of those fundamentals as being so off and not as commonplace and as normalized. So when you don't have those things right, and anything goes, we have a really big problem on our hands. And I know that having conversations about this, that, and the third, right? Like as we're doing, it helps, right? Just like throwing a small cup of water on a blazing fire. It helps a little bit, but really though, not really though. So it's like you got to change a tire. Let's say you get a flat tire, and then a Formula race car, a mechanic is like, here, use this, and they give you this super powered, very, very advanced tire air filler. Tire pump, etc. And you can't really use that. Or let me think of a better example. You need
No, I got you.
You know what I mean? You just need to do math, but they give you a calculus book, right? What happens if you give AI to somebody who's never even touched a computer? So it's the tools can do whatever they can do, but if the person at a basic level doesn't know the basics, they're not even gonna be able to use it if they're not at that level, right? If we don't have basics of self, if we don't have fundamentals of self, then what are we gonna do with AI? What are we gonna do with all these extra advanced tools, right? If we're not as advanced.
This is what makes AI being implemented into Mac OS, for example, a beautiful thing, because I've worked in a nonprofit where our goal was to close the digital divide for good for Georgians. And it was the adult learners that resonated with me the most, because there would be these classes where we're actually teaching adults how to use a computer, like how to open up a file, how to do all these things, how to change the speaker icon, all of that. Right. But the beautiful thing with AI now and the positive ways being used, like with Mac OS, somebody can say, hey, can you just mute my microphone? And eventually, if not now, AI can do that. Or I need to make a resume in Word. Can you do that and send my daughter an email? It can be done. And so I do see how AI can replace basic functions of actually utilizing things, or having to navigate and do stuff like that. We're definitely getting to that age where you don't have to left click, right click, drag, all of that. A lot of that is going to go away. And I do see that being positive, especially in my experience, seeing adult learners who have never picked up a computer. I could see that helping them a ton, because I'm telling you, bro, that used to hurt me when I'm like, dang, you don't even know how to, start the computer or whatever. It was crazy. It was so jarring. So I'm excited about those developments, because that will close the digital divide and normalizing the playing field, because those same adults, 50s, 60s, 70s, they may still be looking for work. They still may need to do basic things. Imagine somebody who's 70 they haven't talked to their family in a long time because they don't have a phone or whatever. They can look up people on Facebook and find long lost relatives. At some point, AI is going to be like, hey, can you look for my great grandson? His name is this. I think he lives in Ohio. Boom. And it comes up, and then that connection is able to be made. It would be very hard for a 70-year-old who may have never touched technology to try to find that on their own.
I mean, it's hard to lose weight without, it's hard to lose weight without using Ozempic or a pill that makes it go off makes the weight fall off you fast, right? It's hard. But what are you going to do? You're actually going to use solutions. You're going to think. Your brain is going to get progressive. It's going to get constructive. It's going to get realistic. Your emotions, you're going to go through emotional turmoil, but you're going to have adversity, right? Hopefully, right? I love AI. Don't get me wrong. But what skills, what basics, what solutioning, what's not being stretched, what's not being flexed, what's not being improved, what's not being advanced? Because instead you have this tool to be able to drop all of these skills, to be able to drop all these requirements of self and instead place them onto this tool instead. Nope, you have the responsibility, tool, to solve for this problem. So I'm not going to use any of my resources. I'm just going to write this prompt and you're going to give me what it is I need. Cool. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the fact that it helps a lot. AI helps in a infinite amount of ways, but we're still at a very serious deficit when it comes to the average person being able to do what they did no more than 30 years ago, right? I can't build a house. Now, don't get me wrong. Could everybody build a house, 30 years ago during No, but there's a lot more basic skills that I bet you we had 30 years ago. But if we're to jump back 100 years, it gets pretty ugly. There's a lot of stuff I can't do, right, that they could. There's solutioning. There's ways in which they problem solve that never crossed my mind because I have tools to help me do that. We got a problem. We've been had a problem. And
It's
I
a
don't know.
problem.
It's like, here's the thing. This is going to help. This is going to help a lot, and it's going to hurt a lot. Is the average going to be net positive? Are we going to be able to pull a bigger dub from this? Or are we going to stay neutralized and continue to have dubs and just this ongoing rolling list of issues because we're not putting the right prioritization on these basics and fundamentals, right? We're not making sure that we strengthen these elements of our humanness as we move along while we integrate technology and tools into our day-to-day life, right, for the betterment of our timeline and for whatever it is that we're trying to do with it. That's a problem. That is a problem.
Right. I mean, AI should be a mirror. AI should be a mirror. Like we should be able to look into that mirror and be like, am I smart enough? No, let me get smarter. Am I this? Am I that? It should be utilized in that way. To that point of building a house, imagine a 70-year-old building a house with their hands right now because fundamentally they just never knew how, so then they go to school and they learn, but they still can't build that house. But that 70-year-old can ask AI, I want to build a house in the woods because I need to live off the grid and I'm tired of paying taxes, right? Like that can be done. They can even source the people to build the house if they have the money to do all of those things. So while, I think we're going to start going away from the motor skills that are needed to use technology and to do things, we still cannot lose the fundamentals of like the reading and math and stuff like that. But what's going to improve is the mind muscle and imagination, because if somebody who may even be handicapped and can't actually accessibility wise, access technology to do those things. If they can talk, if they have the ability to talk, AI it's only limited to their imagination. And then once we start learning how to talk to AI and technology and stuff like that, like it's Star Trek, my favorite show of all time, then sky truly is the limit, as long as it's not replacing the fundamentals of what you need to exist in this world. So I think we're going to be okay. But what you have to watch out for are arguments like, you can just listen to a book. AI can read the contract for you. Your lawyer can read the contract for you. You don't need to do that. Again, it's all about access. It's still all about fundamentals and what you do with those fundamentals, not only how you utilize it, but how you embrace it and empower yourself to empower others from a very fundamental level. If you'd like to learn more about reading, visit MikeSick.markmont.substack.com.
Thank you for listening. Support this podcast by joining us on Substack, where you'll have access to our podcast archive and microcast of video clips. Full episodes and exclusive unreleased video podcasts are available to supporters who pledge monthly. Your support genuinely helps us keep showing up, creating, and sharing with you. Thank you for helping us pour a little more into every episode.